This is Susan Reed. I'm the principal keyboard player and the education consultant for the Anchorage Symphony, and I'm joined today by Elizabeth Schulze, our music advisor for the Anchorage Symphony as we symphony on this year, and we are now approaching our finale concert. Wow, what a landmark. We've made it through the year with COVID and lots of testing and music and live streaming. And Elizabeth, what is your perspective now on where we started in September as we approach April?
Well, I'm right in the midst of it all right now, finishing up our second Kaleidoscope concert, filled with wonderful gems of the chamber music repertoire, and now moving into one of the great symphonic, I don't even know what to say. It's called Fantastic Symphony.
Yeah.
And Fantastique, Fantasy Symphonie. It is such a landmark, and it's not an outlier anymore, but it still jars, it still disturbs, it still provokes, but it also is so much fun. And I think it's a really appropriate way to end a season that has been all about obstacles and overcoming them, and indeed sort of facing illness, death, war, everything that's going on. In some ways, this symphony sort of will be a kind of cathartic experience, I suspect, for some of the audience. As well as fun. It's fun. It's crazy. It's just crazy fun.
It's fun. Really hard to play, but it's so rewarding for the musicians and for audience.
And I think it really reflects the work that the players that all the musicians have done throughout the year, and it brings us all together at the end. Brings all of us together. We sort of started with everybody at the very beginning with the Hail Stork and with Randy's Yupik piece and the Yupik song, and then another big piece we started with that just went out of my head, but it used the whole orchestra, and the danson. So we started with a lot of people on the stage to bring us back, and then we sort of did mix and match all the way through the rest of the season. And I feel like this is a suitable conclusion to a very challenging season full of sort of recovery, reconciliation, and renaissance. So I think moving forward, it bodes well.
Yes, very, very definitely. So really excited. And another thing about this concert is, as I was reviewing my notes for the pre-performance activities, it's this French connection thing of the program. And each of the three composers has a big, strong Paris connection. And Paris is one of the most wonderful cities in the world. And here are these amazing musician artists who all spent most of their lives there, or all of their lives. So let's start at the beginning of the program with a piece that I just think is just an utterly brilliant choice on your part to begin the concert with one of the final works by Lily Boulanger. And she died at age 24, and what an amazing talent. The first woman to win the Prix de Rome, just stunningly gifted and lost so young. But this piece is just magical. So what was in your thoughts about programming Lily's work?
Well, first of all, it is a magical work. It pairs well with the Ravel Concerto that we're also playing, because it's timely, they're contemporaries, and a lot of people think that she's sort of that third, you have Debussy and Ravel, and she's actually the third in a very important triangle of compositional development, because she comes from Fauré directly, in ways that Debussy doesn't, and in ways that Ravel didn't either, for different reasons. But she really pulled from the 19th century, but was, of course, pushing into modernism as well. I find her fascinating, and honestly, only knew her. I spent a summer at Fontainebleau at the American School in Fontainebleau that was run by her sister, Nadia Boulanger. And Mademoiselle Boulanger had passed, I think, just a year or two before I went to study. So all of her acolytes, all of her assistants were still there, importantly still there. And even the composers that she championed, like Duthieu, were there. So I and all the Parisian musicians who played in the orchestras were teaching. I was taking violin lessons from Pierre Amaliel, who had just won Tchaikovsky or something. I mean, just kind of all these magnificent Parisian-based musicians were teaching me. And Lily Boulanger was sort of a saint in a photograph, and now she was her sister Nadia. And they were sort of models. They were sort of people you looked up to. The ultimate in musical attainment, musical training, musical ability. But she was sort of a saint, a distant saint, and not much of her music had really been recorded that I had access to. Now, some of her choral music, I think her sister, Nadia Boulanger, famous teacher and organist and conductor and player, she had recorded, but I wasn't really aware of it. And in my choral background, I had never heard a work of Lily Boulanger. This was still a time when women composers it was just assumed that, women didn't match up very, they didn't. And now, because of people like Joanne Falletta and the Women's Philharmonic, early on, back in the 90s, I think she recorded this very piece, and also the companion piece about the evening. There's the morning and then the evening, and Soir Triste or something like that. It just opened my eyes to, wait a minute, this is not true, that women have been contributing to the conversation in substantial ways, in absolutely matching quality. And boy, did I miss out in knowing her music earlier. So it's in some ways an opportunity for me to go in deep and teach her music to the orchestra, and also make it available to our audiences. So it does start all the way back to my experience in Fontainebleau, outside of Paris, studying at the Boulanger School, basically, and hearing about her. And being able to play like Debussy's string quartet in Debussy's summer home.
Wow.
That was, those kinds of things, because she had connections to all those people.
Yeah,
the connections were still there.
Well, it's just going to be a joyous. It's just so lovely, brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a theme, I think, also for the concert, is that each of these composers is a brilliant orchestrator, just brilliant, and the showcasing, but yet so different from each other in terms of the music we'll hear, but that skill with orchestration and color is fabulous.
It is interesting. She wrote it as I think a piano and violin, and then I think she might have written as a trio or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's, so it could sell well, because she had finally gotten a publisher and they were encouraging and all that. And she needed to support the family because her father had died, who was a musician, and her mother was a Russian princess, but you know,
funny.
And her older sister was teaching, so and had not given up completely composition, but really ceded the field to her sister, her younger Lily, who was clearly the most gifted of the two, although they're both so brilliant it's ridiculous. Anyway, the piece itself is it goes in different directions in terms of dynamics, in terms of tempos. It definitely surprises. I think that's what I would say about the pieces. It isn't a 4-square piece, and it isn't a piece that you would expect from Debussy or Ravel, even though written around the same times and with the same kind of sounds and language and harmonies, sort of, she's bold. and she makes some very interesting choices, which I think is what makes her really interesting. And I think you're right, she knew exactly what she wanted from the player, from the orchestra, from the instruments. And she was an expert orchestrator at 24. I mean, that's about how old she was when she wrote this. And she was expert at it, and understood that, you know, you have to put a note in for the trombone or a note in for the trumpet here, because you're going to want them to play. And they have to be warmed up because they have to play a whole extended pattern.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that that expert instrumental writers do. They understand that you have to prepare people, and how do you do that without preparing people, but using an opportunity for a changing color to not only prepare the musicians to play something more extended, but to give drama, or, you know, an exclamation point or something somewhere else. Those things usually come after many, 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 many years of experience, and the musicians coming up to you and saying, you know, this is not in the range of my instrument, or I can't play this. This is just way too hard. Can we figure out another direction? And she'd already figured out all of that. She listened to her teachers. She had amazing teachers, but she had to do a lot on her own because she was grudgingly accepted into the academy. You know what I mean? She was clearly the winner of the Prix de Rome, but she had to try twice because she was so sick. She had Crohn's disease or something like that, which they didn't know was Crohn's disease at the time, and would now be something that she probably could manage and would live with. But it just took her down because it's so devastating if you can't treat it. And I can't even understand. I know people who have had Crohn's attacks, and it is so painful. It is so debilitating. I don't even know how she possibly managed to create so much.
She was ferocious and passionate about her music.
You're right. Yeah.
So yay. And we'll celebrate Lily and hearing this magnificent piece to start. The middle portion of the concert is Ravel's amazing, stunning, brilliant piano concerto. And it was one of the last pieces he wrote in his creative life, which I found a little poignant to learn, also related to Lily. But such a fascinating character in music history, and his own path. And of course, everybody thinks Bolero when you hear Ravel, but there's so much more to Ravel. So what drew you to this particular piece for our French Connection sandwich here?
Interesting. It was between Saint-Saëns and Ravel, and it was up to our guest pianist, Michael Brown, who is a very close friend of mine, and is one of the brilliant young people from America writing music and performing. He's just a really extraordinary person. I have premiered a few of his works, and I have performed with him many times. Just I think this past season we premiered a work called Merging Pods, which was all about coming back after COVID. You know, we're all in our pods.
Oh, yeah.
Slowly coming back together. And so it was a clever, fun little piece. But the season before, we were part of a premiere of his, I guess maybe second piano concerto at this point. I don't know, but it's just a remarkable, lovely, fabulous person. And the Ravel is one of his favorite works. It certainly is one of mine. And I've performed Ravel with him before, so I know there will be a total merging of understanding in terms of how he comes to the piece. He understands the depth, but he also understands and is able to convey the brilliance of the piece too, because it's very virtuosic. I find it very interesting that Ravel had Mozart and Saint-Saëns in mind in terms of wanting it to be light and not too deep, because it actually is pretty darn deep.
It is.
He can't help it, because there is this side to him that he held hidden for everybody. No one really knows much about him because he lived a kind of monastic life and didn't share his inner life with maybe anybody, but very few people that we know of. There's not a lot of personal experience of a very charming, suave, well-dressed man. But you don't really know much about his private life or his inner thoughts or torments or joys, except through his music, which he was devoted to. I think he was just focused. He was an artist focused on his work, and he had very cordial relations with his fellow musicians. He was a conductor, and he was in the world. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't say he lived as a monk or anything. He was in the world. But I think maybe it was that cross between French and the Basque, which is sort of Spanish, not really, it's that extra range in between France and Spain that holds a culture and holds themselves separate. And so maybe that I think was his mother Basque, maybe. There was so there was something hidden in him. And that couldn't help but come out as musical depth, as far as I'm concerned. Especially the second movement is so beautiful.
Oh, it's just fantastic. Yeah. One of the too many annotators I was reading were all just saying the same thing. It's one of the most beautiful slow movements in the repertoire, blah, blah, blah. But it truly is lovely. Yeah. And between the first movement and the brilliant finale, it's this oasis of just heart, and it's just gorgeous. So
yeah, it carries everything in it. It's a short-ish concerto, only about 22 minutes or something. It is tour de force for orchestra. Everyone thinks, oh, it's a concerto, no problem. Accompaniment. No, this is a full blast. Rhapsody for orchestra as well. I mean, there's really a lot for the orchestra to do, and the last movement just goes by so fast. Yeah.
Oh, how exciting!
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
And looking forward to welcoming Michael Brown to Anchorage. So then there'll be this intermission space for everybody to rev up, and then one of the real masterworks of the Romantic repertoire, Symphonie Fantastique. And the backstory is insane and glorious, and Berlioz's life was insane. And this piece, he was only 26 years old, and he writes this first symphony is this symphony. I mean, it's mind-blowing. So wow,
it still is. Every time you go to it, you're just like, wow, you were crazy. You were genius though. Think of this man who didn't play the piano. I mean, because most symphonists of the time played the piano, and so they could compose at the piano. They could always, even if they were composing away from the piano so that they could hear the colors and the sounds of instruments, they could go and play a couple chords or whatever. He was a guitarist and something else. To think up all the sounds that he created. We have to remember what's going on in Paris at the time. I mean, the opera, the influences, the nationalism, the wars, just the craziness coming out of the revolution and Reconstruction and all kinds of stuff going on, but artistically as well. And if you look in Britain as well, the fantasy, the novels that are coming out of ghosts, and I mean, think of Wuthering Heights and all of those, digging up people and
I found a quote I'd never seen.
And I think that's what it fed his imagination. Of course, Shakespeare. He saw a woman performing Shakespeare and fell in love with her, even though they didn't speak language. And he wrote a symphony all about that passion and that unrequited love. And then he finally did meet her. After she heard the piece, she realized, oh, that's about me. And they sort of fell in love, although there's questions around that. And it was a ill-fated marriage. I find the symphony a warning. Do not fall in love with someone you think you've killed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it's,
true.
it's
And
crazy.
the other,
Yeah.
I found an interesting in his development prior to writing the symphony, he was training to be a doctor, and in fact, I hadn't realized it. He qualified as a doctor.
Oh yeah.
He and his roommate spent a few pittances on a. They bought a corpse to dissect in a dissecting room, and then because he also had a side job as a clacker at the opera where you are hired to boo or cheer so he could go for free, he would sing opera arias while he was dissecting. I mean, yeah, that one just really, I can't get that one out of my head. So that just makes it even make more sense that he's
Yeah.
so
He was just romantic. I mean, these are this over the top, the Werther, of the Germans, the Schumanns, all those people that were just, and Schumann, of course, was a contemporary and reviewed the symphony. I mean, these people were over the top. They didn't need, well, I guess they needed a little opium. At least the protagonist in the symphony is in an opium induced dream. But this is just a time of extremes and also right before Freud, right? Because it's several years before, but the mind, the moving away into the inner world of and finding truths and opportunities for artistic expression from the inside of the psyche. That is really, we see it a little bit in Beethoven. And we know, Beethoven did put so much of himself, which is not to say Mozart or Haydn didn't either, but it's just, they had different purposes for their music. That was clearly to entertain and at the behest of the king or the duke or whoever. But starting with Beethoven, and of course, Berlioz is a young, not contemporary, but just generation afterwards. And Beethoven put himself, or sought to speak directly to an audience, sought to bypass the duke, bypass everyone, and go right to you, from the heart to the heart. And that was very attractive to the generation right after Beethoven. Some people took the form and the power of Beethoven, I think Mendelssohn and others, but it was that direct connection, and the self-reflection and self-consideration, a confidence that what the artist has inside is totally worthy of being heard. It had to have been a very, if not arrogant, certainly confident person to put his heart, his everything out there, his sordid world to be, music in such an incredible way. I don't even know if people do that now.
In the same, in fact, an anonymous description I found, which plays right into what you're saying, is that the symphony is an autobiographical masterpiece of exhibitionism and self-pity, the revolutionary temper of the age. And it's,
we don't see that again until Mahler's Seventh Symphony or something like that. Sorry if anyone loves Mahler's Seventh Symphony. I apologize. I've never been able to enter into that one. I think he whines too much on that one. But at any rate, Mahler took on that. Strauss did a little bit with his domestic symphony and stuff like that. But that was all more humorous and loving. But you can see the through pattern from Berlioz to the end of the century and to the world of Freud and psychology,
of Tchaikovsky even. There's this thread that just, it builds.
Although I think Tchaikovsky might have been kind of horrified by that. I don't know that he would agree. I think he would have been a little put by that, it would have been too much. But what we know of poor Tchaikovsky and
good heavens,
that, but I don't know that all of that comes into his music in the same way as Berlioz, or Mahler or something like that. So look, we have witches dancing at the end with the Dies Irae clanging around in the background,
a guillotine chopping off a head.
My God, march to the scaffold, self-punishment to the glory, but it's so so fabulous and in your face,
Yeah.
Yeah. Ta, 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 at the end of there is just, he's putting it to society in some
Oh,
ways.
yeah. Yeah.
I am here, and this is what music can do, and this is the power. And I understand that, and I'm going to bring that to you, because it was from the opera stage. I personally think that he was overwhelmed with theater and with opera, but he wanted to not have to use the voice. Now, later on, he did use voice a lot, and a lot of his great works are with the voice and with chorus. But in this way, he made the orchestra be human voices and human sounds and sounds of the world. And he found incredible combinations of instruments that could create shrieks or mimic the gargoyles on Notre Dame, the grotesqueries of things, shrieking instruments in the highest range and in the lowest range, using percussion. I mean, the fact that 4 people are playing timpanis at one point in the softest part of the symphony, the third movement.
Right.
And yet he has 4 people playing the thunder at the, in the third movement, because it's a pastoral movement that does sort of look back to Beethoven's Sixth Symphony, but just takes it into a different direction completely. And second movement, talk about French waltzes. I keep forgetting how good the French were writing waltzes. You have the Invitation to the Dance and all of that kind of thing. But you think it's Austrian, but Tchaikovsky wrote great waltzes, but so did the French. And of course, La Valse of Ravel's. But here, Berlioz, early on, this is quite something. It's glorious with all the harps and the strings, and it's just it's one of my favorite movements of the symphony in some ways, even though it isn't the most challenging. It is in terms of technique and for the orchestra to get that big sweep, but it's not a full orchestra. It's a reduced orchestra in terms of the instrumentation and stuff. But it's so elegant and lovely. And then the first movement, I think, is a genius. This is the moment where it's audacious. I have to say, first time I encountered it, I think I had to play it for an audition for the Cleveland Orchestra assistant conductor or something like that. And I didn't really understand it. I mean, I did, but then I was trying so hard to interpret it that I probably took too long, because it starts and then it stops. It starts and it stops. And it's clearly someone kind of speaking to the audience. In the violins, it fades away and then it tries to start again. And it's as if someone is speaking either in a drugged haze, which I think Bernstein thought, you really understood what it was like to get high, There was no symphony that ever started that way, There's no symphony that started stopping and starting with this kind of hesitancy, with this kind of trying to pull all the fumes together and focus. And I think it's just a stroke of genius. And I don't really know of any other symphony that does that. Now, there might be tone poems that do kind of things like, but there's nothing like that in the history of music, where you stop and start in the same way. In opera, yes, but not in symphonic, not on the concert stage. So that must have really astonished and troubled people. I know Mendelssohn was horrified by the whole thing, thought Berlioz was just, just mad. Schumann thought he was kind of interesting. But that's 2 different personalities. And Liszt, of course, loved it, because Liszt was moving in a revolutionary way to a different forms, the tone poem and all that. So yeah, gosh, it's one of the most astonishing symphonic works of all time. It continues to surprise and puzzle and challenge and delight and frighten and yeah. But it it doesn't need to be played at Halloween all the time. It really it is. It doesn't need that. You don't need to know the program. And I think after a while he was a little dismayed that that he had written so much about the symphony, because I think in the end he really wanted it to be received as a legitimate symphony, as a piece of abstract music, which on some level, of course, it was, because he was writing in a musical form that is abstract and is not specific to words, not specific to specific feelings or sounds or anything. It's specific to itself. It's self-referential. And I think if you didn't know the program of the symphony, you could still be astonished by it and still find it a journey that is definitely worth taking. Definitely worth taking.
Yep, it works on every level. So perfect in so many ways. Well, Elizabeth, thank you for sharing your thoughts on the program for the grand finale. And one other thing I wanted to bring up is there's a sadness and a celebration happening at the same time at the last concert, which is, this is our concertmaster, Catherine Hofer's last performance with us as concertmaster after decades in the orchestra, playing in the section, becoming the concertmaster in the early 1980s. So it's a big change and transition, and she has provided such amazing musicianship and leadership to the orchestra all these years. So I just wanted to reflect on that for a moment and publicly thank Catherine.
Yes, I think I'm so glad that you brought that up. She's just been a delight to get to know, and a stalwart in the orchestra, and such a place of calmness and confidence, quiet confidence. We'll make it. It'll be all right. We'll figure it out, kind of thing. And also leadership, just by her own personality, by the force of who she is, and the many years of experience she has. She has gifted the symphony with so much, and I will miss her. And I know that the orchestra will miss her sorely, because she has been central to the leadership of the orchestra and to its direction and development over these many, many years. I think there are several people in the string section that studied with her and or were influenced by her as a conductor in school or something. It's kind of, it's going to be a very different world for the orchestra.
And thank you for bringing that up, because I point out that in addition to the symphony and the role she's played with this important institution, she's a retired public school orchestra teacher. She taught private for many years. She was the Highland Prison Orchestra director with a very innovative program, the Society of Strings for people who wanted to pick up their instrument and play again. The list goes on and on about
central to Anchorage music, central to this region.
Yes.
And I mean, it's not just the Anchorage Symphony Orchestra that will miss her presence. Of course, the whole community will. But she has exciting prospects ahead, and she is very excited about the next chapter, and that's wonderful. We can celebrate her work with us, her friendship, and all of her legacy is immense and ongoing. And we can celebrate that she has exciting things ahead for her as well. So
here's to Catherine.
Yes, absolutely.
So Elizabeth, thank you so much, and looking forward to the finale concert and symphonying on as we maneuver COVID and maneuver getting more music out into the world.
We've only just begun, Susan.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.